Hey, it's Jared. I recently switched to an iPad M4 11-inch. I have had the 13-inch iPad Pro for the last several iterations since the M1, and I've enjoyed the larger iPad, whether it be the 12.9 or the 13-inch. But I've recently switched back to an 11-inch, and that has invited the case conversation. What case can I use with my iPad 11-inch so that I can have it protected and also just be as functional as possible? Now, first of all, we're going to start off with a case that I use that has some specific use cases to me, but then we're going to dive into a whole bunch of other cases as well. So if you want to jump around, use the timestamp so that you can do that. I also have links down in the description so that you can check out the pricing and availability of these cases. Some of them come in some different finishes and different options and stuff like that as well. So first of all, we've got this case called the Pivot case. Now, this case is primarily geared towards pilots or private pilots. I have my private pilot's license, but I use the Pivot case in a lot of other aspects as well besides flying. One of the reasons that I'm switching to this device is because my iPad mini is getting a little old and a little slow, and I wanted something a little bit faster. So the Pivot case is a case that covers the entire iPad. You can see that it's got a cover on the front here that covers the display and protects it. On the back, we have a kickstand. We also have the case attached. And so there's a quick release right here, and I'll show you basically how that works. If I open up the case is integrated as a stand as well. And so we've got a stand that's adjustable. You can basically slot it into these different adjustments here so that it has a different angle. And that's really great. It's pretty stable, has a little bit of a bounce to it, but it's meant to basically just be in display mode here. And if I had a keyboard, I could use that keyboard and a mouse, and it would work out really well. Now, when this is closed, it covers up the iPad and covers everything and keeps it really safe. Just takes a little bit of getting it lined up just right, and boom, you're there. You can see here that there's also a place for the pencil to snap in for better protection. Obviously, it's in its charging position right now, and there's a position on the back of the case for better safety. So this pops right off. Now, if I don't need this, I could set this aside, and then I basically have a case on the iPad. You can see that there's kind of grips right here for holding the iPad. Feels really good to hold it in those grips, feels very secure. And there's also a kickstand on this case as well. And so now I can kickstand the iPad and view it at pretty much any angle, even go pretty low. And this is a good angle for writing. So I like being able to put it in kickstand mode, especially if I'm using this as maybe a second monitor for my MacBook, and I'm using this as an external monitor. I could just kickstand the iPad, have my MacBook, and have those dual displays, which is really great. I haven't even gotten to how I use this in aviation and with working out and the different things that this case really is amazing for. But first, let's check out that pen location here for pen storage. So if I take my Apple Pencil and snap it right into place here, now the pencil is safe and secure, and it's not going anywhere. And so it can't just pop out of this little tray up on top if I accidentally bumped it. It's now safely stowed in the case. Then I could pop this out, put the Apple Pencil right back in place. What is probably the best feature of this case is this quick release on the back. Now, the front portion of the case connects the same way. And so you slide this in like so, and then you can cover up the iPad. But there's also adapters in which I can snap this into mounts. And so on my treadmill, I have a mount. In front of my drum set where I practice drums, I have a mount, and I could just slap my iPad right into place, and then I have it readily available, and I could use it as my display for playing music. And usually when I'm running on the treadmill, I'm using Zwift. If I'm at the drums, I can have my sheet music or the lesson or something that I'm utilizing for practicing drums up. When I'm flying in a small airplane, I have a mount that attaches this in the airplane so that I can mount this iPad and use it for navigation. This case is just so many things. What it also is, though, is a little bit bulky. So if we look at the thickness of the case, it does add a bit of bulk to our iPad. These cases have gotten so much thinner over the years. This is actually thinner, I think, than the case that's on my iPad mini, which is the same case, it's just on the iPad mini. You can see here that the buttons are still accessible, everything's still accessible on the case, but it is a little bit of a case. And getting the iPad off of this case also is a little bit of a process. I always end up taking a screenshot because the buttons get pressed down. If you make a choice to go with this case, you're probably going to want to leave your iPad in this case because getting it out of the case is a little bit of a process, and you definitely don't want to hurry through that process because you don't want to maybe tweak your iPad. There is one really cool hidden feature of this case, and it's on the inside. It's this little circle. Any ideas what would go here? Well, I don't have one in there yet because I had to order another one because I'm using my other ones, but an Apple AirTag can go in here. And what's super cool about that is that should you misplace your iPad, you set it somewhere, you can't really remember, maybe you left it in the car or whatever, the iPad's battery goes dead. And then your location changes. The AirTag being in here is going to help you find your iPad. And yes, I know that it will signal the last location that the iPad was or whatever, but if the iPad gets turned off, the battery goes dead, or whatever the case may be, you're not going to be able to find your iPad. But with an Apple AirTag that's hidden inside the case, that is a killer feature and definitely a really neat benefit to the Pivot case. Here is the documentation that comes with it. Nothing too crazy, just really simple documentation. It's one of the most adaptable, useful cases that I've been able to find. It does a lot more than these other cases, but it is a lot more than these other cases. It's a lot more in price. It's a lot more in the size of the case, the thickness, and all that good stuff. Let's move on to the Apple Folio case. This is the standard Apple Folio iPad case that's been around forever. It's super thin. It's super functional. It does not add much to the thickness of the iPad, but it does add functionality because it protects the front and back of the iPad, fits the camera module really nice, and obviously turns the screen on when you open it up. And then you flip it around and then it becomes a stand. And of course it has different positions, so I can lower the iPad angle and have different viewing angles and all that stuff. There's just 2 positions. But what I really like about this case is when it is in this position, I can hold it like a book. So it is kind of like a thick book, but I will often hold the iPad like this so that I can grip it and comfortably hold the iPad without having to really grip the screen and have my fingers on the screen. It makes it really easy for me to hold. Sometimes I also will just kind of fold this over like so and pinch a finger in between, which essentially does the same thing. It just kind of makes the iPad able to flop around a little bit. But this is another comfortable method for holding the iPad like a book. I really like this case because it's so simple and thin. It does not add much to the iPad, but it also doesn't add much functionality to the iPad either, other than protection and a little bit of a kickstand. Now, if we jump over to our Magic Keyboard case, obviously this is a device that I use with my iPad quite often, especially when I want to do some computing, I want to write, I want to browse the web, answer some emails and stuff like that. Nothing beats the Magic Keyboard case. It's got a decent sized trackpad. It has now a function row on the front. All of the keys are spaced pretty well. They're a little close together. In my comparison of the 11-inch and the 13-inch iPad Pro, I identified that yes, not only are some of the keys smaller, like the tab and shift and return and delete key, but all of the other keys are just a tiny bit smaller in the keycap size, making everything just a little bit closer together. But I think Apple does a fantastic job of having good spacing with the keys, considering the fact that it is a smaller device. And so this does fold up really nicely. One of the differences with this case this year is that the hinge is metal, and so it's no longer encased in kind of a wrap. There was metal in the previous model, but it was encased with a wrap, and so the metal is now exposed, which is kind of nice. The previous wrap would kind of get gummed up, and you could just tell it was used over time. Now with the metal hinge exposed here, I don't really see any problem other than sometimes the metal is just bumping up against things, and I'm just afraid maybe that I will ding something because it doesn't have any protection over it. I'm not worried about the case at all, but I do have to be mindful of the fact that I have this big metal protrusion coming out of the case now whenever I'm moving my iPad around. You can see that it does add a bit of thickness to the iPad, but it's not terrible. It does add a bit of weight as well. We have USB-C charging down here, but this does not pass through data or anything else. It's simply for charging. I was really hoping that that would be something that would change, is that we'd be able to connect our external hard drive or a USB-C hub or something like that to the bottom of the iPad, but we still have to connect any external devices to the iPad directly from the side of the iPad, but we do have charging down here, which is great. Overall, the Magic Keyboard case is fantastic. I think it is expensive, but it's definitely a accessory that's worth having because it's so good as far as a keyboard and everything goes. Next, we're taking a look at a folio style case from ESR. This is their protective series, and I've always liked ESR cases. I have reviewed ESR cases before, and it tends to be one of the best sellers as far as cases that I've reviewed. And so let's go ahead and pop the iPad in here, get this thing out of the way, and drop the iPad right in. Snap it into place. We can also put the Apple Pencil up here as well and cover that up. So what I really love about this is that it is just like the Apple Folio case, except it has a clasp that then covers your Apple Pencil and protects that from getting lost. The Apple case does not have this clasp, and so your Apple Pencil is exposed, and all it would take is one bump and the Apple Pencil would go for a ride and you'd never see it again. If you do have the Apple Pencil Pro, of course it works with Find My, and hopefully you'd be able to track down your Apple Pencil, but I really like having the clasp that you just simply snap closed and the Apple Pencil is not going to come out of there. It is very safe and secure. So let's go ahead and open up this case and pop it into that kind of tripod mode. What we do have here is this flapping around, but if I move it around to the back, it magnetically attaches to the back to keep it out of the way, which is great. I don't even really see any of the case at all, which is great. It gets out of the way of the viewing experience of the iPad. I tend to, like I said, hold my cases or hold my iPad like a book, and this feels just as secure as the Apple case. The Apple Folio case felt pretty secure. I didn't feel like the iPad was going to become detached or anything like that. I feel really safe and secure. Even when I squeeze this a little tight, I feel like I'm holding the iPad. It's not going to go anywhere. And then if I kind of maneuver this around a little bit and try to hold it in more of a compact way like I did with the Folio case, that works as well. And I feel like I've got a good grasp on the iPad, and I can hold this and read a book or view some YouTube content or whatever for a long period of time and not really get any fatigue at all. Let's test the viewing angle. This is our viewing angle here, and if we go up one more, it doesn't look like we have any additional viewing angles. As I kind of rotate this around, we just have the one viewing angle. And so unlike the Apple Folio case that has a couple of different viewing angles, we don't have that with the ESR case, which is kind of odd. I don't know necessarily why that wouldn't work in that second magnetic position. This case just does not work in that fashion. And so that's interesting, but nonetheless, not a big deal, I guess. What I think is the killer feature of this case is the fact that it closes up with the clasp, and the clasp protects the Apple Pencil from getting lost. Now let's take a look at a case from Zugu. This is another kind of folio style case, but it has good protection all the way around, a kickstand built in, and it has some options for the Apple Pencil. The Apple Pencil can snap right in, and you'll notice that there is a layer of protection here over the iPad covering this section. When we do put the Apple Pencil in, it still snaps into place and charging is supported, so we're not losing any functionality there. But if you don't need your Apple Pencil charging, you can actually slip it right here into the back, and that's a nice storage spot for your Apple Pencil that is very safe and secure. And so what I really like about some of these cases that we've looked at so far is the option for charging support still, but then we also have some form of storage for the Apple Pencil that is more safe and secure. So we do have a kickstand that pops out of the back here, and that works in conjunction with the front cover. You can see the positions here. As we open up the case, we pop this around to the back and kick the kickstand down, and the kickstand will magnetically attach into these different positions. And so you can see here, this is actually magnetically attaching in any of these little slots, and this gives us a ton of different viewing angles, starting with a very sharp viewing angle here, almost straight up and down, and then we can move this all the way down to the last position, and you can see that this has pretty good support, even though we're in almost laying down position and the kickstand is out pretty far. This has pretty good support. So if I wanted to use my Apple Pencil here, I could push down and move around on the iPad. I can even have my hand on the iPad and be writing and stuff on it and not have any issue there. So this case is great for those of you that are artistic using your iPad in that way, or perhaps you do a lot of writing. It's a fantastic option for that. And then of course, we just lay the iPad down flat and we have access to the entire screen there as well. So what I really like about this is when you close it, it sits flush. Everything is nice and flush, and it magnetically attaches as well. So it closes and shuts off the screen to the iPad, and we've got protection all the way around. We're not exposing any sides like a lot of the other cases. We've got our speaker grills with plenty of access so that we can still hear everything. And we just have all around protection on the iPad. If you move around a lot with your iPad, or you put it in a bag that it could potentially slip out of, or you slide it into a bag up against other things, this is the kind of case that's going to provide a ton of protection. And then also with that additional storage for the Apple Pencil on the back, gosh, I just really like that. And so while this case is a little bit much as far as what it is, I mean, it does add a little bit of thickness to the iPad. It does add a little bit of weight. You know, you've got a lot of magnets in this case and all that stuff. It's not terrible. It's not extremely heavy, but it does add a bit to the iPad, but it adds a ton of protection without adding a ton of bulk either. So I have to say, I do really like this case. I think it's a great option, especially for those of you that want more protection coverage out of your case. For those of you that want something a little bit classier, we have a case from Torro. This is a leather case, and I have to say, it really adds a lot of style to the iPad. It's really nice. It's got a strap on the back that you can use to keep the iPad closed like so. You just flip that strap around, just like a notebook. I mean, really nice. This just feels good. I really like this case, and I haven't even spent a ton of time with it yet, but I have a feeling that this is going to be a case that I use on my iPad when I'm going to the coffee shop, when I'm traveling around, and I just want something that doesn't scream iPad, and I want something nice and clean. This gives me that journal vibe, but still, I know that I have my iPad Pro on the inside, which is great. So let's open it up. You can see that it recognizes the opening of the case, and we get the screen coming on. We can also slide the iPad down into any of these little slots here for different viewing angles. And so as we move the iPad down and get additional viewing angles, I can kind of push down on the iPad here. It's not slipping. And so that's really nice that even though we're at a lower angle here, I could push down on the iPad and we're not slipping. And so for writing, for drawing, for any of those things, it's going to be great. You'll notice that even though we have case protection on the outer edge here, the Apple Pencil can still attach and charge, which is great. And then as we close this up, it just has a really nice sleek look. I mean, gosh, I really like that. I would have to say, like, the only thing that you might lose a little bit of from having a case like this is just it's not as comfortable to hold in this position. So with the front cover on the back, it's just not as comfortable. But what I like is that there's some space here, and I can put a finger there and then grip this and still hold this one-handed and hold it like a book and view content and all that stuff like I talked about earlier in the video. I like being able to do that. So I'm glad this is not completely attached and that it has a space there for a finger so that I can hold the iPad like so. And then obviously on this side, with the Apple Pencil out of the way, I can kind of do the same thing, which is great. So I'm really liking the style of this case, and the leather feels good. It doesn't have that super fake leather feel that a lot of other leather cases tend to have. Just love the fact that I can close it up just like a journal or like any sort of folio book and carry this around. It's unassuming. I mean, yeah, you can see the camera here and you know that there's an iPad in there, but I mean, if I'm carrying it like this to the side, and the Apple Pencil, it might be a dead giveaway, but I mean, it looks clean. It doesn't look like a piece of technology, and I like that. So this would definitely implement better into my life and trying not to just have technology everywhere and have a little bit of style, whereas a lot of these cases add a lot of functionality. They don't add a ton of style. You know, the front cover is pretty sturdy. I mean, I feel like it kind of slides around a little bit. I wish that the magnets held it a little bit tighter, but with the strap on the front holding everything together, we don't have that problem. Everything feels really good. I would wonder over time how marked up this case could get, like with marks and stuff on the side. Actually, that's not too bad. But I mean, if I scrape at it a little bit, yeah, I mean, over time, like any leather product, it's gonna end up looking worn. But I just have to say, I think they did a pretty good job. We've got all the buttons and everything protected, but good access to them. USB-C charging port here on the bottom. Everything just looks good on this case. I like the minimal branding. We just got like the little logo there. We have a little bit more branding back here, but it's not terrible. It's not over the top. I don't know. I think they did a great job with this case. I've tested out a lot of leather folio style cases like this in the past, and I think this one just, it feels good. It's got good quality. It's not super heavy. The inside of the case here, this is very kind of silicone, flimsy, and that's fine. You don't need a ton of extra because you've got all of this leather protection all the way around. So really we're just relying on the silicone inner just to protect the edges of the iPad should you drop this, should it come in contact with anything. But I think they did a great job with this case. Everything looks good and feels good. So I have to say, probably one of the better leather cases that I've come across in all the years that I've been reviewing cases. Now let's look at the Speck Folio case. This is a case style that Speck has been making for a long time, and it has a long track record of just being a great case, very protective and functional. As you can see here, it completely covers the iPad from all angles with hard plastic going around the edges, and so we've got tons of protection there. We have the folio style cover that has a clasp, and then you'll also notice the Apple Pencil sits inside of there, and so it's protected and kept safe from getting bumped. But I mean, it could get kind of, well, I'd say it could get knocked out, but I don't know. It would take a lot to really knock the Apple Pencil out of there and for it to get lost. You open up the clasp and the case opens up, and the iPad screen comes on because it recognizes the opening of the front cover. And then it also operates like some of the other cases where it sits on the front cover and we can adjust the viewing angle, a lot of different viewing angle adjustments there. But not one that's super low. Most of these are pretty high angle. And so we've got the very first one, which is pretty high, a very high angle, not 90 degrees, but definitely close to that. And then we get down maybe that's 45 degrees. And so nothing lower than that. If we went lower than that, it's nothing, there's nowhere for the case to sit in. And so it kind of flops around a little bit. It's still very usable. I mean, if I was using the Apple Pencil and I had my hand on the iPad, I could definitely use the iPad in this way, but it's floppy and it's not really designed to be used this way. So I probably would either decide to rotate the device the other way just to hold it flat and keep from all of this being in my way. I could also just rotate this down. And then of course the clasp being now on the back will snap and keep it from flopping around. So that's kind of a nice feature as well. This is not going to be flopping around behind the iPad. And now I could just set the iPad down like this and use the iPad, and it is pretty sturdy now, and I can use it in a flat tabletop mode, which is great. Now, it also does have the ability here with some space in the back for me to hold it like a book. I like this. Any case that gives me an additional point of contact to hold the iPad is great, because otherwise it's hard just to squeeze the iPad with pressure and hold the iPad that way. I like having an additional point of contact here so that I can kind of sandwich a finger in between and hold some pressure on it and then hold the iPad. I don't have to squeeze my hand as hard to hold the iPad, and I really like that about this case. Now, I've had this particular case on many iPads in the past. I've had it on an iPad mini for years, and the case still looks great, and it still performs well. The clasp does not wear out. Everything has always been great about the Speck cases, and so I know from experience that this case is going to hold up. You'll also know that there's an attachment here. We could store our Apple Pencil in there, as you can see. But one unique feature is that the camera is covered up and protected. So when we have this closed, the camera has full protection. But if you want to access the camera, it just flops down like that, and then you have access to the camera. That's been a unique feature on this particular Speck case for years, is that it's one of the only cases that gives you camera protection as well. So if you're sliding this iPad in and out of bags or whatever else on tabletops, it's not, I mean, camera's not touching anything. The camera is fully protected. And then when you need to access the camera, which I don't know, if you're like me, I'm never taking photos with my iPad or using anything camera related with my iPad unless I'm scanning a QR code to set something up. I can then expose the camera so that I can use it. And that means my camera module is always going to be nice and clean and ready to go. Not going to have any scratches or any issues there. So I think Speck really landed on something when they first designed this case and came up with this kind of flap idea of protecting the camera module. A great feature and a great reason that the Speck case has stood the test of time and not requiring any design changes. This magnetic case from ESR has some really neat, unique features. So let's take a look at all of these different options on the back and try and make it transform and do it all as it says. So what's really cool about this case is it provides a ton of protection all the way around. It is a little bit heavier. This feels heavy compared to a lot of other cases, but it's providing a ton of protection all the way around the iPad. And one really cool feature of this is that I could just flat out remove the iPad from this altogether. We have a case on the iPad still that protects the iPad all the way around. And so I could just take my iPad and use it like this if I don't want to have this additional protective case over the front and the back. But all I have to do is just snap this into place and then close the iPad, and we've got a folio that just completely protects everything all the way around. So what's cool about this case is that it does have a kickstand, and you could flop this around and go with multiple viewing angles. It magnetically attaches to the back here in each of these positions. And so we could go with a really high viewing position like this. I mean, this is probably pretty close to the most aggressive angle that I've seen so far. This is darn near 90 degrees. It's almost straight up and down. That's straight up and down pretty close. And this is pretty darn close to straight up and down. And then we've got multiple angles going all the way down here. And then when we're in that position, we can add a lot of pressure. I mean, I'm pushing down on this quite a bit and it's not giving. So great viewing angle. Also great for the Apple Pencil because I can put my hand on the iPad and write and use pressure sensitivity and all of that stuff and not have any issues with this case because it's strong. It's so sturdy. So as we go up with this viewing angle, what we can also do just to get even more height out of this, because perhaps we're giving a presentation or something like that, I can mount the iPad up higher, and then in that viewing angle, you can see here that we've got quite a bit of height. And yeah, it's a little floppy. I'd be afraid of this just taking a hit. Well, I don't know. I say that. It's not, I mean, that's pretty safe and secure. But if I was giving a presentation and, you know, typically your iPad just seems to be down quite low, that's not the case with this. I mean, this is up quite high. So if I'm giving a presentation to someone and I'm swiping through stuff, no longer is the iPad so low and my eyes are up here. We're much closer. And so it's easier to give a presentation to somebody when your iPad or when the screen is up closer. And so this is a really neat feature of this case, something that I probably wouldn't use all the time. But if you give a lot of presentations using your iPad, I mean, that's just a great option. And so not only does this have just multiple viewing angles, but it also has that riser that allows you to raise it up higher. Overall, this case provides good protection. It's a little bit flimsy down here around the speaker modules, like the edge of the case, but that's not really that big of a deal. It's providing a ton of protection all the way around. What we also have on the back of this case is a place for you to slide the Apple Pencil so that it's safe and secure, because otherwise, if it's just up here, you could lose it. It could get bumped. You can lose that Apple Pencil. But when it's in the slip back here on the backside, you don't have to worry about that. The Apple Pencil is not going anywhere. So slide it up here for charging and then slide it in the back for protection and travel. Overall, I have to say, I do really like this case. It's not super comfortable to use in the case. I mean, if I was going to be using this, you know, sitting back and wanting to read a book or something like that, or browse the internet, I probably would not be holding the case and the iPad together because it's just a bit heavier. I would remove the iPad from the case and then just hold it. Of course, it still has a cover on it, so it has a layer of protection around the edges and all that stuff and on the backside. But this is much better, much more manageable. And then when it's time to put the iPad away or it's time to travel, you just snap it right back in its case and boom, you're ready to go. Overall, I think this case just provides a lot of utility, especially if you use your iPad in a lot of different ways. So check out the ESR case. I've got the link down in the description. The Unicorn Beetle case from Supcase is what I would call like more of a kiosk style case, or a case that you might see someone use in like a retail type scenario where the iPad has complete protection all the way around because the front cover is protected as well. This is a built-in screen protector. And then we have a lot of protection, including a kickstand on the back of this case also. So we've got a kickstand built in, which is great. Pretty sturdy kickstand. I could say I push down on this a little bit and it's not really flexing or causing any problems. And then that tucks away and is out of the way. We have access to the camera. We've got a nice design style here. We've got anti-slip on this case as well. So when it's on a surface, it's not slipping around so much because of the plastic back of the case. We've got a little bit of anti-slip there. We've got good grip all the way around the case as well. And we have a safe, secure place for our Apple Pencil. We also have access to all of our sensors, so we could still unlock the iPad using Face ID without any issues there at all. Got a little spot back here so we could push through with the Apple Pencil and get the Apple Pencil out. Of course, I say that, but it's probably going to take me a few times just to figure out the best way to do that. The Apple Pencil works just fine, even though we've got the built-in screen protector, so no issues there. And it just snaps right into place, and you can see it does support the wireless charging through the case. So what I like about this case is just all of the protection that it provides. If I'm going to be using my iPad in a scenario where I'm handing it to people, perhaps for signatures and stuff like that, I'm going to want a case like this on it, because this case really protects your iPad from coming in contact with anybody, because it's fully covered all the way around with a screen protector built in, and the screen protector works great. I'm not noticing any issues with the iPad and the performance of the iPad. And yeah, I am running the beta software on the iPad right now. At the time that I'm recording this, iPad OS 18 will probably be released in the next couple of weeks. So overall, I have to say, like, this is a great case. It protects the iPad against pretty much everything. It's not watertight or anything like that, so it's not going to protect against all of that stuff. But I do say, like, if you were outside and it was kind of raining and it was getting on the iPad, it's going to protect the iPad better than probably most other cases. Obviously, there are some cases that are water resistant. This case is going to protect your iPad from a little bit of exposure to liquids. However, all of our speakers and our USB-C, it does have a cover on it. As you can see here, there's a USB-C cover, but it's not a watertight case. And so I can't just throw this in the water and my iPad be fully submerged and have protection. But if it was raining, if it was sprinkling outside, I'm not going to worry about the iPad, just because we've got enough protection on the device to protect against that type of moisture. So overall, I have to say I really like this case. All the buttons work really well. Even the buttons up here, their volume buttons, although they definitely look different, work really well. And I kind of like the fact that there's a little bit of a ridge here, because it helps me find those buttons much easier than I would on a lot of other cases, or perhaps even not having a case on the iPad at all. So overall, I have to say this SUP case, pretty cool, works great, and really protects my iPad. Now, lastly, if you're looking for an external keyboard for your iPad, perhaps you don't want to get the Magic Keyboard case, this keyboard from Logitech, this Keys To Go, this is the 2nd generation, is pretty awesome. It flips open like this. It supports up to 3 devices, and so I just tap on whichever device I want to connect to. And I've got my iPad here. Now I can open up Facebook or pretty much do anything. And it is a very responsive keyboard. So as I type, works great. The keycaps are nice. The spacing is good. It's super slim, as you can see, very slim keyboard. We've got a power button here, but it will automatically go into sleep mode when I close it. And you'll notice that it has a do not disturb button. If I press the do not disturb button, it puts my iPad in do not disturb mode, and then I could press it again and it brings it out of that. Over here, I also have a home button that takes me back home as well. And so it's made to work with an iPad and a Mac. And so it's very great. Amazing little keyboard with volume buttons and all of that good stuff. So as far as external keyboards go, I have to say this is probably one of the best that I've seen. I'll link to it down below. It's the Keys To Go 2 for iPad, and it is powered by 2 coin-style batteries. And those coin-style batteries go right in here. And so you just have to remove that, slide this out, and then that gives you access to the coin-style batteries. This keyboard is supposed to have 36-month battery life, and so it's insanely efficient on power. M4, which means you're not going to have to worry about charging it or anything like that. I would probably just use the power switch in instances where you know you're not going to be using it for a while, just so that it accidentally doesn't get turned back on, because a little bit of pressure could turn it back on, or it could take a little bit of time before it goes into sleep mode. And so if you're vigilant on how you take care of this and make sure that you power it off, you'll probably get pretty close to the 3 years. This has not been out for 3 years, and so I cannot confirm nor deny the fact that it has 3-year battery life. Perhaps once the batteries do die, I will come back and report my findings, so you have to make sure that you're subscribed, and while you're doing that, you might as well hit the thumbs up as well. Thanks for watching the video all the way through. I hope you found it useful. All the links are down in the description below. Make sure to subscribe to get notified when I put out new videos, and we'll see you back in another one soon. Take care.